Jennifer Miller, age 29, worked as a server at Ruby's Cafe, a modest eatery nestled between a hardware shop and a coin laundry in a quiet Kansas town. Her days adhered to a predictable rhythm, rising before sunrise, walking 3 blocks to the cafe, knotting her worn blue apron around her waist, and offering a warm smile to the early morning regulars, a smile that concealed the solitude lingering within her. She lived by herself in a small one-bedroom apartment above the local drugstore, her only connection to family captured in faded, yellowing photographs. Her father died when she was 15, her mother followed 2 years later, and the aunt who had taken her and relocated to Arizona for health reasons, leaving Jenny with infrequent holiday calls and the occasional letter. On a crisp Tuesday in early October, Jenny first noticed the boy. He appeared no older than 10, small for his age, with watchful eyes that seemed to absorb everything while giving nothing away. He chose the corner booth, furthest from the entrance, a bulky backpack propped beside him and an open book always on the table. On his first visit, he ordered just a glass of water. Jenny delivered it with a paper straw and her usual smile. He acknowledged her with a faint nod, almost imperceptible. The next day, the same. Then the third and the fourth. By the second week, Jenny had noted his routine. Arriving precisely at 7:15, 45 minutes before the nearby elementary school started, he would sit, read, sip his water slowly, and observe as others enjoyed plates of pancakes, eggs, bacon, and toast. At 7:55, he'd close his book, thank her softly, and leave without eating. On the 15th day, Jenny placed a plate of pancakes before him, feigning a mistake. "Oh, my apologies," she said as if puzzled. "The kitchen made an extra order. I'll just set it here rather than toss it." The boy's eyes flickered with a mix of wariness and longing. "It's fine," Jenny assured him gently. "The cook sometimes mixes up orders. Better to eat than let it go to waste, right?" She walked away before he could object, glancing from behind the counter as he cautiously lifted the fork. 10 minutes later, the plate was clean, his gaze fixed on his book, deliberately avoiding her, a quiet act that tugged at her heart. "Thank you," he murmured as she cleared the plate. This became their silent pact. Each morning, Jenny would deliver a mistaken order: pancakes one day, scrambled eggs, and toast the next, oatmeal with brown sugar when the weather turned chilly. The boy never requested anything, never spoke beyond a hushed "thank you," but he ate every morsel, sometimes so quickly it seemed he feared the food might vanish. One morning, Henry, a retired mail carrier who claimed the same counterstool daily, asked, "Who's that kid you keep feeding?" "Don't know," Jenny replied. "But he's hungry." After 3 weeks, Karen, the grill cook, pulled Jenny aside. "You're feeding a stray," she said, not cruelly, but with the blunt wisdom of experience. "You give handouts, they don't learn gratitude. He'll vanish one day. They always do." Jenny didn't argue. She only shrugged and said, "It's okay. I know what it's like to be that hungry." It was the most she'd ever shared about herself in her 3 years at Ruby's. The boy never offered his name, and Jenny never pressed. His cautious demeanor, the way he positioned himself to watch both the door and the window, his careful entrances and exits, suggested questions might scare him off. Instead, she ensured his water glass was always full, the pancakes warm, and the cafe a haven where he could relax for 40 minutes each morning. In quiet moments, when the boy was engrossed in his book, Jenny wondered, did he live nearby? Did he have family? Why was he always alone? And why did hunger seem so familiar to him? But she dismissed these thoughts. Kindness with strings attached, she believed, wasn't kindness at all. So she continued their unspoken ritual, noticing how the boy's tense shoulders gradually relaxed, how his eyes lingered on hers a fraction longer each time she approached. That small shift, a fleeting moment of connection, convinced her that her modest efforts, however minor, made a difference. By the 6th week, others had taken notice of Jenny's routine. Most stayed silent, but some couldn't resist commenting, their words tinged with the harshness of those who'd forgotten what it means to need. Playing charity worker on the clock, sneered a businessman who frequented the cafe, his tone implying the arrangement was somehow offensive. Times have changed, another regular rematthewed. In my day, nobody handed out free meals just because someone looked pitiful. Jenny let the rematthews slide, having learned that defending kindness often hardened the hearts of its critics. But Matthew, the cafe's manager, wasn't so easily ignored. One morning, he summoned her to the cramped office behind the kitchen, his face stern beneath a sheen of sweat. "I've seen what you're doing with that kid," he said, fingers drumming on the desk. "We can't have staff giving away free food. It's bad for business and sets a bad example." Jenny twisted her apron nervously. "I understand. I'll pay for it myself." Matthew's eyebrows rose. "From your tips? Those barely cover your rent." "It's my choice," Jenny said firmly, a quiet resolve in her voice. After a pause, Matthew sighed. "Fine. But if it affects your work or that kid causes trouble, it ends." "Got it." Jenny nodded, relief flooding her. She'd braced for a reprimand, perhaps even dismissal, but this compromise she could accept. Each morning, she set aside a portion of her tips, money that might have bought a new coat or paid for a long-delayed dentist visit, to cover the boy's breakfast. On a frigid Thursday in November, the boy didn't appear. Jenny found herself glancing at the door every few minutes, a knot of worry forming in her chest. She prepared his usual pancakes anyway, setting them at his empty booth, just in case. "Waste of food," Karen muttered as she passed, shaking her head. By closing time, the untouched plate felt like a quiet rebuke. Jenny wrapped the cold pancakes and took them home, unable to throw them out. The boy didn't show the next day or the day after. A week passed without a trace of him, and Jenny began to wonder if Karen was right. Had he moved on, as strays often do? The thought left a hollow ache she couldn't name. She'd known nothing about him, not his name, not his story, yet his absence felt profound, like a small light snuffed out. "Told you," Karen said on the 10th day of his absence, her tone more resigned than smug. They never stay once the free meals stop. During this time, Jenny noticed a customer photographing the empty booth where she still occasionally left a meal, just in case. The next day, she learned why. A local Facebook group had posted the images with a snide caption, "Ruby's Cafe now serving imaginary charity cases." The comments were harsher. "Publicity stunt. But they claim it's for poor kids while tossing it out. Feeding strays creates dependency. That waitress needs a wake-up call. Next time a strange kid shows up, remember, you're being played." Jenny had never been particularly sensitive to others' opinions, but the venom in these words stung. That night, alone in her apartment, she questioned herself. Was she naive to help someone without knowing their story? Was she projecting her own past onto a situation she didn't understand? Seeking solace, she opened the wooden box where she kept her most cherished belongings. Inside was a faded photo of her father in his Army medic uniform, his smile soft despite the stark desert background, and his worn leather journal. She turned to a familiar page, reading words she knew by heart. "Shared half my ration with a local boy today. Jackson called me foolish, said he'd probably report our position. Maybe. But the look in his eyes when he ate, same as mine when Mom saved me the last slice of bread in tough times. No one goes poor sharing half a loaf, but those who don't share stay hungry forever." Jenny traced her father's handwriting, a quiet clarity settling over her. She didn't need to know the boy's name or story to recognize hunger. Hunger, whether for food or comfort, asked for kindness, not questions. On the morning of the boy's 23rd absence, Ginny arrived at the cafe with tempered hopes. The habit of checking the door at 7:15 persisted, but the sharp anticipation had dulled to a quiet resolve. Still, she prepared a small plate of pancakes, just in case, and placed it at his usual booth. At 9:17 a.m., everything shifted. A hush fell over the bustling cafe. Ginny, pouring coffee near the window, looked up to see 4 black SUVs with government plates pulling into the parking lot, moving with precise coordination to form a semicircle by the entrance. Customers froze mid-bite. Pedestrians slowed to stare as uniformed men stepped out, standing at attention by each vehicle. From the lead SUV emerged a man whose presence commanded respect before his uniform did. Tall, with a weathered face that spoke of too much sun and too little rest, he wore the dress uniform of a senior military officer, his chest gleaming with ribbons and medals. He scanned the cafe's exterior before striding toward the door, flanked by 2 younger officers. The bell above the door chimed, its sound piercing the sudden silence. Matthew hurried from the back office, adjusting his tie nervously. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, his voice pitching higher. The senior officer removed his cap. "I'm looking for someone who works here. A woman named Jenny." The cafe grew so still Jenny could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator. All eyes turned to her as she stepped forward, coffee pot in hand. "I'm Jenny," she said, striving to keep her voice steady despite the tightness in her throat. The officer's stern face softened slightly. "Jane Cooper," she nodded, setting the pot down as her hands began to tremble. "I'm Colonel Daniel Mason, United States Army Special Forces Command." He reached into his pocket, producing a crisp, official envelope. "I'm here because of a promise made to one of my men." He held out the envelope. "This is a letter from the Commanding General of Special Forces Operations, and I have a personal message from Adam's father." "Adam," Jenny echoed, the name unfamiliar yet heavy with meaning. "The boy you've been feeding these past months," Colonel Reeves explained. "Ethan Parker. His father was Master Sergeant John Parker, one of the finest soldiers I've known." The past tense hit Jenny like a blow. "I don't understand," she said, not yet taking the envelope. "Is Adam okay?" "He's safe," the colonel assured her. "He's with his grandparents in Colorado now. But for nearly 3 months, he came here every morning before school, after his father deployed on a classified mission." The fragments of the boy's behavior, his solitude, his vigilance, his unspoken hunger, began to form a picture. What Sergeant Thompson didn't know, the colonel continued, was that his wife left soon after his deployment, abandoning Adam. The boy was too proud, too scared of being taken from his home, to tell anyone. He survived alone, stretching the small emergency fund his father left, making meals last beyond reason. A murmur of shock rippled through the cafe. Ginny felt her chest tighten, picturing Adam, now with a name, a story, fending for himself, waiting for a father who would never return. "Sergeant Thompson fell in Afghanistan 2 months ago," Colonel Reeves said, his voice steady but not untouched by grief. In his final letter, he wrote that if anything happened to him, we should thank the woman named Jenny at the cafe who fed Adam without asking questions. He opened the envelope, revealing a handwritten note on worn paper. He wrote, "If I don't make it back, find the person giving my son breakfast." Adam mentioned her in his letters. She never asked why he was alone or made him feel small. She just fed him, day after day, expecting nothing. Tell her she didn't just feed a hungry child. She preserved the dignity of a soldier's son. Jenny took the letter, her hands shaking, tears blurring her vision. The colonel's voice seemed distant as he continued. The letter was read at Sergeant Thompson's memorial. When Adam finally told us about you, the Special Forces community vowed to find you and thank you in person. What you did, his voice faltered briefly, what you did for the child of one of our own, without knowing who he was, means something to us all. The cafe was utterly silent. Even those who had criticized Jenny's actions sat still, their faces reflecting shock and, for some, shame. Colonel Reeves stood tall, snapped to attention, and saluted, a rare gesture of respect for a civilian. Behind him, every military member in the room mirrored the salute, as did those outside by the vehicles. On behalf of the United States Army Special Forces, the brothers of Master Sergeant Thompson, and above all, on behalf of Adam, thank you. Jenny stood frozen, overwhelmed by the realization that her simple acts, pancakes, eggs, a glass of milk, a smile without questions, had meant so much to a boy enduring unthinkable loss, to a father fighting his final battles far from home. I didn't know, she whispered. I just couldn't let him go hungry. The colonel nodded. Sometimes, Miss Millers, that's enough. Sometimes, feeding a hungry child without asking why is the greatest kindness of all. As if choreographed, every soldier in the room and outside saluted again in unison. The customers, moved by the scene, rose to their feet in quiet reverence. Jenny, the unassuming server who had lived quietly for years, stood at the heart of it, clutching a father's final words, her small daily kindness having preserved not just a child's well-being but a soldier's honor and peace in his last moments. The week after the colonel's visit transformed Ruby's Cafe in ways no one could have foreseen. The story spread rapidly, from local conversations to social media to the town newspaper. The same Facebook group that had mocked Jenny's charity case now shared a heartfelt account of Sergeant Thompson's letter, garnering thousands of shares and supportive comments. Regulars began requesting Jenny's section, leaving generous tips with notes. Thank you for showing us what matters, and my daughter's in the Air Force. Your kindness gives me hope. Matthew, who had initially resisted Jenny's free meals, hung a small American flag by Adam's booth, adding a discreet plaque, reserved for those who serve and the families who wait. The booth was never empty again, frequented by veterans, active duty soldiers passing through, and occasionally families clearly in need, treated with quiet respect by the staff. On the 7th day after the colonel's visit, a manila envelope arrived for Jenny. Inside was a letter on lined notebook paper, the careful handwriting revealing its young author. Dear Miss Jenny, I didn't know your name until the colonel came to find you. But for those months, you were the only person who saw me as more than invisible or broken. Dad said real heroes wear uniforms, not capes, but I think sometimes they wear aprons. When Dad stopped writing, I thought the world forgot us both. But you remembered me every day, even when I couldn't explain why I was alone. Grandma and Grandpa are kind. They're teaching me to fish, and Grandma makes good cookies. But I miss Dad, and sometimes I miss your pancakes. Thank you for not asking questions I couldn't answer. Your friend, Ethan Parker. P.S. I finished the book I was reading. It had a happy ending. Jenny framed the letter and hung it behind the counter, not for display, but as a quiet reminder of why small acts matter. When customers asked, she'd smile and say, "Just a thank you from a special guest." The cafe's connection to special forces spread through military circles. Soldiers detoured to visit, leaving unit coins or patches, which joined a growing bulletin board of gratitude behind the counter. 3 months later, a school group visited after a field trip. An 8-year-old girl watched Jenny refill water glasses. "My dad says you're a hero," she declared. "Do you feel like one?" Jenny knelt to her level, smiling. "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who knows what it's like to be hungry, not just for food. The girl's teacher, overhearing, added softly, she's right. Hunger comes in many forms. Jenny met the teacher's knowing gaze with a nod. As summer neared, the cafe held a fundraiser for military families, raising enough for a small emergency fund for children of deployed parents. Matthew, surprisingly, matched the donations himself, admitting to Jenny, "Never understood why my dad fed every stray kid in the neighborhood. Drove mom crazy. But I get it now. Sometimes a meal is more than food." On a quiet Tuesday, almost a year after Adam first entered the cafe, Jenny arrived to find a metallic object at her station, a Special Forces Challenge coin, a rare token typically shared among soldiers. One side bore the unit's insignia, the other was engraved, Semper Memor, always remembering. Jenny scanned the empty cafe, then stepped outside, searching the street. No unusual cars, no messengers, just the town stirring awake, sprinklers humming, and the distant school bus on its rounds. She slipped the coin into her pocket, its weight a quiet reminder that kindness given freely sometimes returns in unexpected ways. That evening, as she hung her apron, Jenny noticed Matthew placing a new sign in the window. "Whoever you are, whatever you can pay, no one leaves hungry." Catching her gaze, he shrugged. New policy. Figured it was time. Jenny smiled, recognizing the unspoken tribute in his gesture. No fanfare, just a quiet vow to see hunger in others and respond with what mattered most. Food without judgment, kindness without questions. Walking home in the fading light, the coin a steady presence in her pocket, Jenny thought of Adam, now growing up in Colorado, carrying his father's memory and, she hoped, the knowledge that even in the darkest times, kindness exists in unexpected places. Not every helper seeks recognition. Some just need to know that today, someone isn't hungry, and that alone can change a life. You might forget this story soon, but if no one retells it, history stays silent. Subscribe to Incredible Stories, where justice, kindness, and memory are cherished forever. The young server gently slid the pancakes toward the boy, whispering, "Same as always, honey, no charge." She never asked his name, never expected anything back. But that morning, the town paused as four sleek black SUVs rolled up outside Ruby's cafe. A man in a military dress uniform stepped out, clutching a folded letter. Who were they, and why did everyone freeze?